Good evening. I would like to call to order the August 21st, 2023 Lake Washington School Board meeting. Let the record reflect that all board members are present, as are our new student representatives, Shira and Ella. The board values public participation and engagement in the meetings of the board. Board meetings will continue to be live streamed on the LWSD website and are available for viewing following the conclusion of the board meeting as well. The public are always welcome to email any individual board member at boardmembers@lwsd.org. Because we have a new sitting board member this evening and then two new student representatives, I wanted to take this moment and remind everyone on the dais, we do have a new policy around cell phone use during meetings. So just keep that in mind and tuck your phones away during the meeting. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is going to be our land acknowledgement. Director Stewart.
The Board of Directors of Lake Washington School District acknowledges that our district is on the indigenous land of the Coast Salish peoples who have reserved the treaty rights on this land, including the Duwamish and the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. We thank these caretakers of this land, who have lived here since time immemorial. We commit to continuing collaborating with our Native community to teach Indigenous history of this land and these local tribes to all children of the district. We also commit to provide the best possible education for all children of Native descent who attend our schools.
Thank you, Director Stewart. I will now entertain a motion to approve the August 21st, 2023 agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Director LaLiberty and seconded by Director Stewart to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Our first item on this agenda this evening is the appointment of our newest board member, Lisa Guthrie. At this time, Dr. Holman will administer the oath of office. Dr. Holman and Ms. Guthrie, please step down in front of the dais to conduct the oath of office.
Congratulations, and please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Lisa Guthrie, do hereby solemnly affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Washington, and will faithfully discharge the duties of Director of Lake Washington School District number 414 in the County of King, State of Washington, according to the best of my ability. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Holman. Congratulations, Director Guthrie. The next item on our agenda is a special recognition for a longtime LWSD employee and the Native Educational Coordinator, Mary Wilbur, given her retirement at the end of August. Mary has played an instrumental role in supporting the board over the years and has brought so much knowledge and trust to our district. Most recently, she worked with the Board of Directors on the development of a land acknowledgement, and her guidance and support were crucial to the work of the board. To start off our recognition, I would like to invite the Eastside Native American Education Program students forward that are here to provide a performance.
Getting to know Mary has been a wonderful story. She's a granddaughter, descendant of one of the great chiefs, the Okanagan people in southern British Columbia. On her mother's side, they carry that legacy. She told me stories about her uncle, how he inspired her to always be a leader. She has always inspired me. She's always inspired others too with that leadership. Very grateful for the board to recognize her, the students as well, their families. One of the beautiful stories about Mary, in the 70s when she was a young girl in high school, the American Indian movement came through. There were advocates, activists in the early days standing up for our people and calling for treaties and agreements between nations to be recognized and honored. In this story, she says, I wanted to go with them. My parents said, no, you have to stay. She said what she heard at that time touched her deep in her heart. And that's the first song we want to sing tonight. Song of the American Indian movement. And she's taught it to these children too. Encouraging them to always stand for the people. Stand for a good life. Good thinking. Good planning. To accomplish all that you can. Without the sing the song. The second song that we're going to sing is a song that is an honoring song. And in the work with youth, Mary and I would always tell the young people, these songs are to be sung whenever someone carries forward the value and the good teachings and benefits the community and lives by these ways. And when they accomplish things, accomplish deeds, then these songs like this are to be sung for them. So I was asked by the parents to come tonight and help sing this song with the students. And I tell each one of them, you too, you need to live life the best you can. And someday, you'll also have a song sung for you. It's a great aspiration. And I know Mary and I too, that's what we hope for you. So yeah, just thinking here for a second, again, of this family that she descends from, and what a beautiful legacy. And many of her elders have passed away during the time that I met her. And many times Mary shed tears over them. But from that, she gained a lot of strength and more determination. And so with that, she has poured her life into this work, into this district. She appreciates all the allies that she's made, the good relationships. She appreciates all the support of the school district, of the community over the years. She wishes all the blessings to those who come after her, too. So when these songs are sung, the honoree is supposed to come up here and stand. Yeah, please. Oh, it's the wrong song. Hold up. Oh, gosh, that song's stuck in my brain. That's the song I composed for her family. That's a different song.
Thank you so much for that music. I would like to invite Superintendent Dr. John Holman to say a few words about Mary.
Before I get to my prepared comments, the word new beginnings keeps coming to me. And sometimes new beginnings come to us through fire. Sometimes new beginnings come to us through other ways. Sometimes it comes to us through quiet and calm. And what I know about this new beginning is that Mary is taking a next step in her life, a new beginning. But she also has a whole team of people that has been put together. And in each of the students that are here tonight, and each of the students in the Eastside Native American Education Program, what has been instilled in them has prepared them for this new beginning. We don't know exactly what that new beginning will be. We don't know exactly what that is, but with new beginnings comes new opportunities. And so for our parents and our community members that are here who are directly connected to our Eastside Native American Education Program, you are part of that new beginning in supporting what that looks like to maintain the positive, the amazing culture that has been created within that network of young people. And so tonight, as the word new beginnings comes to me, it's in a variety of ways. But each of you has within you what it takes to take that next step, even though we don't know what that next step is. And so thank you for being here tonight to recognize this amazing person. And so what an honor it is to recognize and celebrate Mary Wilbur this evening. How appropriate that we recognize Mary with these young people here representing what her life's work has really been about, and that is to impact her communities, and in the last 20 years, impacting the young people in Lake Washington School District, Bellevue School District, and the North Shore School District. Mary is a champion for students, a champion for Native culture, while ensuring that the Native students in Lake Washington, Bellevue, and North Shore gain a connection and an appreciation for their heritage, their culture, their language, and their ancestors. Mary's work crossed all departments. There were no boundaries when it came to Mary's work. She had to be nimble, she had to be patient, she had to be dedicated to the equitable outcomes that she knows the Native students in these school districts deserve. Mary Wilbur was hired as the Native American Education Project Lead in 2001. The position was retitled to Native American Liaison. I think at one point it was Eastside Native American Education Coordinator. Her first supervisor was Jane Andrew, and in the latter years of her career, she worked with Director Kelly Pease very successfully. I've had the unique opportunity to work with Mary in a number of capacities over the years. My first interaction with Mary demonstrated her character that has been confirmed over the years, time and time again. In that interaction, we were in a student meeting at Eastlake High School. Mary displayed compassion, the highest of expectations for both the students, the staff, and the family that was present. She displayed an understanding of Native culture and supports, in the need for the adults to come together to support the best interest of that student in that moment at that point in time. I walked away from that interaction excited to continue working with Mary. The Eastside Native American Education Program is a model for districts all across this country. This program has provided connection, meaning, value, and the essential nature of Native culture and language. The students in Lake Washington, Bellevue, and North Shore have been so fortunate to have a staunch advocate and role model leading them for the last 2 decades. I would be remiss if I didn't provide information about the Eastside Native American Education Program, because what it is today is different than it was 20 years ago. So ENAP is a federally funded program that assists Native American, Alaska Native, and American Indian students in Lake Washington, Bellevue, and North Shore school districts in grades kindergarten through 12th grade. Since the initiation of the Indian Education Act of 1972, the federal government has assisted local school districts in funding educational programs for all Native American, American Indian, and Alaska Native children. These programs are intended to provide children with programs that not only offer the opportunity to succeed academically, but to enrich their culture and lives as well. And if I just pause and think about that last statement, both academically and culturally enhancement. And you really can't have one without the other. You have to have both, and that's what this program has achieved. Over the years, all Native students have been afforded these services. Once a week after school activities, homework support, mentoring, coordination of home and school needs, student advocacy, cultural events, tribal language exploration, Native Youth Leadership Academy, and high school clubs. I reached out to a prior supervisor, someone by the name of Paul Vine, and this is what he wrote about Mary. You're fearless and tenacious in your advocacy, and our community is indebted to you for your time, commitment, and passion. Your ability to not only lead with compassion and passion, which are equaled by your ability to organize and activate community resources, to provide rich academic and mutual experiences for your families and students. The focus you have put on academic achievement and the support systems you have in place for our students has had a positive impact on their lives, their academics, and their futures. You have been an incredible resource for me working with families, and I truly feel blessed to have been a part of your team. You have always been able to bridge the unintended cultural barriers that exist in our school communities and have ensured that your students' and families' needs are met consistently. You're a guide for both the schools and the families to our complex systems, our rules, and our procedures. I believe your knowledge, experiences, and leadership have resulted in very positive outcomes for our students, families, and districts. It is an honor to work with such an outstanding person as you. Thank you for all you do and your continued commitment to your work and your passion. Mary, from the leadership in Lake Washington School District, from the staff in Bellevue, North Shore, the students that you have served, we owe you a debt of gratitude. Thank you for your service, thank you for your commitment, and congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you, Dr. Holman. I would like to invite Director Siri Bleasner to say a few words about Mary on behalf of the school board.
Good evening. It is my honor and privilege to be able to speak on behalf of the board to thank Mary Wilbur for all your years of service to our community and specifically to our Native American, American Indian, and Alaska Native students and families in the Bellevue, North Shore, and Lake Washington School District. I had the pleasure of first meeting Mary and learning about the Eastside Native American program when you presented at a board meeting as one of our host schools nearly 10 years ago. In that short presentation, it was clear that she had developed a connection and built a strong program to ensure support, belonging, and success for students and families as they went through the K-12 system. I know when I see an eagle feather on a graduation cap, I will always be reminded of you and think of the program that helped to support the students. And Mary, I want to thank you for what you have provided to the board as well. And President Choi mentioned it in being able to develop the land acknowledgement with your guidance. Your willingness to answer our questions, provide that guidance, and to spend time working with the board to understand how to best support this program and our students was invaluable. I know that I and the other board members, and those who are no longer here as well, have learned a great deal from you, the elders in this community, and that we have had the opportunity to meet, and from the students sharing the value and strength of the program provided. Mary, you have been a blessing to our community, and your legacy will remain through the lives of the students, families, staff, and community members that you have touched over the years. So on behalf of the Lake Washington School District Board of Directors, thank you congratulations on your retirement, and we are certain that you will continue to be a change maker and inspiration in this world.
Thank you, Director Bleasner. I would like to now invite Kelly Pease, the Director of Teaching and Learning K-5, to say a few words.
Could you come up? I can't do this without you beside me. So, I had the opportunity to work with Mary for over a decade, and during that time, I became a much wiser human. I'm honored to be before you and the team of students and families and district leadership to recognize you and the work you've done for Lake Washington School District. You've truly built a legacy that will continue with the program and with every student and adult that you have had the opportunity to work with. In appreciation of Mary, we thought it appropriate to have a gift for you to remember Lake Washington School District. And so I had done some research and ended up downtown Seattle at 8th Generation store, and I was overwhelmed by the beautiful native art that was presented. And I had the opportunity to talk to them about you. And I said, let me describe Mary, and then you can help me make a decision on what we would like to gift you. I said every year in October, she hosts and facilitates a Native American Veterans Powwow. She ensures our Indigenous youth stay connected to their tribal cultures, and the team at the school store took me to this blanket, and this blanket is the Honoring Warriors blanket, designed by Dante Biss Grayson from the Osage Indian tribe. He shares that warriors walk among us and says the design inspiration is from our soldiers and veterans to people battling cancer to your best friend with an indomitable spirit. We each know someone worthy of the title warrior. Mary is our warrior with indomitable spirit. She shows up every day to relentlessly advocate for the Indigenous youth, families, and greater community throughout our districts. Indigenous culture is at the center of the work she does with students that celebrates their Indigenous roots through learning their tribal language at language camp, working with the elders to provide each student with their Indigenous name, and moving our students onto their next journey through our graduation eagle feather ceremony. There are 3 yellow stars on this blanket that represent Mary's advocacy, courage, and unwavering commitment to our Indigenous youth to ensure they have access to the highest educational experiences while maintaining connections to their roots. This is not an ending, but a beginning for Mary. Although we'll miss her immeasurably, we're looking forward to the great things she will do for Indigenous peoples in the next chapter of her life. Mary, thank you for all you've done, for being my friend, and for being someone who just has taught me so much. This is not the end of our connection, but the beginning of what it looks like when you're not just a quick Teams call away. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelly. The board, executive cabinet, and Kelly would like to now get a picture with Mary in front of the dais, if everyone could bear with us for a minute. Yes, here. So thank you to all of the students, the families, and staff that came to honor and recognize Mary this evening. The board will go ahead and take 5 minutes so that anyone who wishes to transition out of the business meeting of the board can do so before we continue with the board's meeting. The board is now in recess for 5 minutes. The next item on our agenda this evening is public comment. The Board of Directors of Lake Washington School District welcomes the public to the business meetings of the board and encourages community engagement. The board dedicates 30 minutes to hearing from the public during the public comment period of the meeting, and participants should not expect a response from the board at the end of their comments, as we dedicate this time to listening to your voice and would like to get as many members of the public an opportunity to speak as the time allows. Members can sign up for public comment on the district website at lwsd.org/board/public comments, and sign-ups close at noon on the day of the board meeting. Comments will be offered in the order of sign-up. We did have one person sign up for public comment this evening virtually, but it does not look like they are online at this time, so we will not be having a public comment section this evening. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the August 21st, 2023 consent agenda. I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second?
It has been moved by Director Liberty and seconded by Director Bleasner. Dr. Holman, will you please poll the board?
Yes. Director Guthrie,
Yes.
Director Stewart,
Yes.
Director Bleasner,
Yes.
Vice President La Liberty,
Yes.
and President Choi.
Yes. Thank you. Motion carries. Dr. Holman, will you please summarize the donations?
Yes, tonight in the board's packet, there's $29,727 of donations from our PTSA. As the board knows, as we start ramping up for the school year, our PTSA is always there to provide supports for our schools. We greatly appreciate that support, as it does help us provide programs and services for our students.
Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is adoption of the 2023-24 budget. Dr. Holman? Wait, we didn't do the consent agenda. Oh, wait.
Good. Okay, and so the situation tonight regarding the budget, the 23-24 draft budget was presented to the board at the June 20th, 2023 meeting. A public hearing for the proposed budget was held on August 7th, 2023. The budget was posted on the district's website, and copies were made available to interested persons. Feedback could be provided via the website or email. State statutes require the board to hold a public hearing on the budget and adopt the budget by resolution, which also establishes the tax levies necessary to support the general fund, the capital projects fund, and the debt services fund. The F-195, the state's budget, formal budget, is the official budget to be adopted tonight. All program totals agree with the district format, which has a much more detailed set of information. So tonight, the board has Resolution 2357 for action.
At this time, I will entertain a motion to adopt resolution number 2357, adoption of the 2023-24 budget as presented.
So moved.
Second?
Are there any board members with questions or comments? It has been moved by Director La Liberty and seconded by Director Bleasner that the board adopt Resolution number 2357, adoption of the 2023-24 budget as presented. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. The next item on our agenda is a program update on the Community Resource Officer Program, formerly known as the School Resource Officer Program. Dr. Holman?
Yes, and so tonight here with us is Deputy Superintendent Matt Gillingham. The Resource Officer Program and really the school safety responsibilities has fallen within the scope of Matt's division for a number of years, and so he's here tonight to provide the board with an update around the program and specifically around the Community Resource Officer program implementation. And so Matt will provide a presentation for the board. If you have questions, I would jot them down because there's a lot of answers that come as he presents. I know as he and I were talking through this, I had questions that he continuously said, oh, it's coming up in a few slides. Just because of the scope and breadth, it's helpful that we walk through the whole presentation, jot your questions down, even with slide numbers if that's helpful, and then we can come back and review any questions. Matt?
All right. Thank you, Dr. Holman. So every year we have the opportunity to come and do a program update regarding school safety. And typically we have presented either in June or in August this year. So I'm going to provide the board with an update regarding our school safety program, specifically with respect to our relations with and contracts with our local police agencies. But first, I would like the board or request the board kind of indulge me because I want to provide a bit of historical context. Actually, first I'm going to do our policy connection. So the board has a policy, OE10, which directs the superintendent to establish and maintain a learning environment that's safe, respectful, and free from unnecessary disruption and conducive to effective learning. So that would be the policy connection for this particular program. I don't know why we're have asteroids going on here, but so for the last maybe 4 or 5 years, we've used this model called layered safety, and I've talked with the board about it. We've actually have a kind of a briefing paper that's available on the website that it goes into more detail about each of these layers. But the general concept is that that there's not one singular thing that we do in our schools to help keep our students, our staff, and our visitors to the school safe. That it's a combination of a variety of things in these different layers that contribute to safer learning environments. And so as I was thinking about this the layered safety in the context of kind of a continued evolution of our relationships with police agencies, kind of thinking back to about a decade ago, and I think about what was present in those layers. And about a decade ago, we had at some of our schools, we had some school resource officers, we had administrators, we had some counselors. They did our staff did drills. We did have a comprehensive emergency management plan. And we had some ways of communicating and some community partnerships. But over the course of the past decade, we have made a variety of investments that have increased the number of administrators in our schools, have added some technical resources such as school cameras. We've actually built a risk and safety services department. There was a point in time which that didn't exist. We have added mental health supports. There was a point in time where we didn't have any mental health counseling in our schools whatsoever. And we have continued to invest and increase that investment year over year in mental health supports. We have added entry access controls so that our buildings, once the students are essentially in, you need a buzz to be able to be admitted into the school. We've invested in school safety and prevention specialists, which again, didn't used to exist, and we've expanded that year over year. So As we think about where we are today, it's very different than where we were a decade ago in terms of the resources and the kind of the breadth of resources that we have within our school assessment. Threat assessment protocols is another example. A few years ago, we adopted the Salem-Kaiser model for conducting threat assessments when there were concerns. So all that's to say is that as we continue to evolve our programming that, and the supports, that prompts us to continue to evaluate how all of these resources fit together and how we need to continually adapt to be able to ensure that our school campuses are safe places. So that will lead into talking about kind of the continued evolution of our partnership with municipal police agencies. So I talked a little bit about how the focus within the concept of layered safety and security. We also are, there's a context related to our budget and also related to the staffing constraints that some of our police agencies are experiencing. We'll talk a little bit about the difference in the model change and what some of our areas will experience this year that's different from last year. A name change, and then we'll talk about kind of how this fits in the context of the school safety staff that are at our secondary schools. And then we're launching a program called Community Connectors to engage in an ongoing dialogue with our community regarding school safety. So kind of going back and thinking in this historical perspective when we had school resource officers and not as many different layers, we asked a lot of those officers. I remember being in the context of, as a school administrator a decade ago, and when a student indicated that they were expressing a level of suicidality, that the only response that we really had at that time was to engage a police officer to try to get some sort of help, because we didn't have the screening tools, we didn't have clinicians who could screen, we didn't have staff in buildings to be able to provide that kind of support, and we didn't have the robust network of referrals that we've built up over that time. And so over that time, we've essentially built out additional layers of support such that we're in a position where what we're able to do and where our interest is actually to go in greater depth in those areas that our police partners are kind of uniquely equipped to do, that are things that we're unable to do, or areas that they essentially have, there's a value proposition that they can uniquely provide us as within the school community. Similarly, our traditional model where we've had SROs has been that it's an officer has been assigned to a singular school. And that has meant that we have schools that didn't have an SRO or a police officer assigned to them. It's also meant that when we've experienced staffing shortages, that the model essentially meant that school didn't have some sort of coverage. And recognizing that when we look at some of the data that our police agencies are reporting back, is that there's needs that actually exist at all of our schools that they're responding to. And so really there's an interest in establishing a community model such that we have officers who are able to be connected and have relationships, particularly with the leadership of each of our schools to a region that they're assigned. It allows for kind of a more robust or flexible staffing model, and it ensures that where there's a variety of need, that those resources are connected to where those needs are, instead of necessarily being concentrated in just one area. So over the course of the past couple of years, some of the things that we have been doing is we've actually been reducing the budget or reallocating the budget that had been held for our agreements with police agencies. And so Last year, we reallocated $362,000 from this budget, and this year we're reallocating $413,000. The majority of that is moving to support and maintain our behavioral health services at the middle school and our choice high schools. So we were able to initially expand the offerings at those schools due to some one-time grant funding. When that grant funding expired, we needed to identify some additional funds. What we looked at is that these were the police agencies were actually not able to fill all the positions that we were currently funding. And so there was excess capacity in this budget. So we reallocated those funds without actually reducing the number of officers that were being contracted with. And we had heard from some of our agencies that they were having some challenges and difficulty filling some of their positions, which is why we had some unfilled positions and had some excess capacity. So kind of this combination of looking at kind of the constraints that as a district we were experiencing, that our agencies were telling us that they were experiencing, as well as thinking about how can the model evolve in that context, given that we've also built out more robust layers of safety and security within our schools. So we're establishing, or kind of every year we enter into an agreement with police agencies, and so in that agreement, the purpose statements is that we are asking them to provide expertise and guidance related to threats, safety, and security in the context of our layered safety and security program, and that's we unfortunately, our schools respond to a lot of threats. Fortunately, most of them are not serious, but we take each and every one of them serious. And those are, in those moments, those are times where having relationships with officers who understand what our capabilities are, what our constraints are, what some of our needs are, and likewise for us to understand how to work with them and what are the things that we can ask of support for them in those moments is very beneficial. And that gets to kind of understanding that relationship of what are the operations and impacts on our service and response. We have a commitment to keep students out of the criminal justice system, and so part of that is also helping ensure that that our police partners understand what are all the things that we can do to address student behaviors that of concern, and to engage and provide supports that within the school system to do that. And then there are also times and opportunities where our community resource officers are able to connect families to some supportive programs. So we kind of within all the constraints, we are evolving to a new model, and this is actually a model that is not new for our Redmond area. So last year, Redmond experienced some staffing constraints that we had historically contracted for 3 officers, one to be stationed at each middle school and one to be stationed at the high school. And that they were not able to staff in that way. And so we moved to a model where we had 1 officer assigned to the entire region, and began to look at what might that look like to serve a community rather than necessarily a single school. We realized that for within the Redmond area that provided some benefits that met both of our constraints, and it actually allowed us to provide service to more of our schools. And it led to a conversation that said, what are kind of those unique benefits or those unique things that we need to focus on in this partnership? And so I'll talk a little bit more around what those things are. Just kind of some additional processes. So annually we update memorandum of understanding. That is currently, each agency is currently reviewing those. And then one of the things that we've sat down with all of the agencies together and have agreed that we'll develop a standard operating procedures manual to really provide clarification on kind of more of the day-to-day expectations. And we're looking to have that completed by September 30th, and then that will be something that will be publicly available to be reviewed and can evolve and continually be adapted. So the primary duties of a resource officer, I'd say first and foremost, we have a keen interest in support and guidance on threats of violence, of harm in our community. And sometimes those occur outside of the school environment, but then come on to the school environment. We've had some instances of that in the last year or two where some things are happening within the community that are impacting students, and then those are coming onto campus, and then sometimes it's on campus and is perhaps evolving elsewhere. And then we've also seen an increase in online threats that may be from our students, or they may not be. And in those instances, actually, the police have some tools that we're able to get some things going that can help us determine that in order to evaluate the threats. Obviously, they respond to 911 calls at schools. This is an interesting thing because police would respond to 911 calls at schools whether or not we had an agreement with them. One of the things that we've discussed is it's in those moments, what type of relationship do we want to have in these things that where they're going to happen, there's going to be police response. And what we've seen in some other communities where there's not that relationship is that there's opportunities for confusion and conflict between the adults that doesn't necessarily resolve the situation. Sometimes it has nothing to do with students. It could be another adult. So one case was another adult on campus that's not supposed to be there, and a police officer and the principal are not speaking the same language. They didn't even understand what portables meant. And things like those are not the times when you necessarily want to be trying to explain, how to navigate a school campus or a school community. Having both that relationship and then the resource officers receive additional training in this state. There's a requirement that they receive additional training. There's a long list of things actually in our policy that also requires that. So things around youth civil liberties and how to engage with youth, and kind of understanding the school system. And so these are officers that have both expressed an interest in working with youth and have gone through additional training that goes above and beyond kind of what your standard officer would engage in. I mentioned earlier that we use a multidisciplinary threat assessment protocol. What that means is when there's concerns about a student, historically, a student would have had to do something that then prompted a disciplinary response. So they would have had to do something that raised enough concern and it was actually an action. Disciplinary response, you remove the student from school. That was how historically we responded to kids that we thought were a threat. Well, that doesn't really actually do anything to necessarily make us safer because we're not really looking at what are the supports, what's the underlying conditions, and sometimes there's kids who are maybe engaged in some behavior that should be concerning, but it's not disciplinary in nature. And so a multidisciplinary threat assessment protocol, when there's a student that's identified that may be engaging in some behavior, maybe writing something that's of concern, you get a team, behavioral health specialists are part of that team. The community resource officer can be part of the team. The school counselor is part of that team, the school administrator. So people that might have different perspectives as well as get to know the students from different. And they're looking at trying to both evaluate whether or not the student poses a threat, but they're also looking at what are some of the environmental conditions that we might be able to change to provide supports for the students. And so the officers provide a perspective on that. And it's one perspective amongst many, and so that's part of the role of a community resource officer. Conducting safety and security assessments and scheduling those, and that's something that we have a keen interest in ensuring that those are all happening. I remember doing a walkthrough with a resource officer at a school I was at, and the officer noticed that some of the vegetation near the building had grown up in such a way that actually would have made an emergency response to that school more challenging than it needed to be. That's not something as an educator that I would have recognized, and I appreciated that that was flagged. We were able to get that resolved right away. And so we are expecting that our resource officers are going to their schools and doing walkthroughs and helping that school administrator think about, in the event of an emergency, what are some of the things that they need to be aware of? Are there potential vulnerabilities? How would that emergency response look like at that school? So again, that team has an understanding of that. There are times in which there are formal kind of actions that are taken, such as truancy or no trespass or child welfare. And again, having officers who have a higher level of training and working with youth hopefully makes those interactions more positive than if they were essentially served by an officer that didn't have that training. We've also been talking a lot about thinking about kind of traffic and auto collisions on our campus. So where we have at our high schools, where we have young drivers, and they're all coming in or going out at the same time. We also think that's a very stressful time of day. Parent, like, I want to get in and get out. And those are times where we have a lot of pedestrians, we have bicyclists, and while we believe that we try to design our schools in such a way to mitigate and think about those, again, to have somebody who has experience and has a perspective on that to go out, look at those, that's something that we're asking each officer to do with their schools, so that if there are things that we might be able to mitigate, that we're able to mitigate and reduce our risk that somebody is getting hurt in those instances, or, at a minimum, perhaps maybe speed the flow of traffic so that our impact on our neighboring communities is less. Unfortunately, but every so often, our building administrators might have to confiscate something from a student that they shouldn't have or not legally be in possession of. We don't want our administrators to have those either. I certainly didn't want, as a building administrator, to have some of those things any longer than necessary. And so the community resource officers provide a conduit for being able to take those items from them and have a standard procedure for disposing of them. Educational support, when requested, is continued to be an option, and we expect them to comply with all the same district policies and procedures that apply to our staff. So we're kind of thinking, like, well, what does a typical day look like? And the team came up with more of, like, well, what are some of the very specific things that we would be pointing to in this model? So one of the expectations that we have for the community resource officers is that by the end of the first month, and then every month after, we're expecting them to check in with every school that they're assigned to. Again, part of that is to build relationships with the school administration team, so that they know what to expect of each other, because that's not when we respond to a threat, and I've been in a lot of those conversations over the past decade, that's not the easiest time to try to form a relationship or try to figure out your status, or what can I do, what can you do, where are those kind of barriers and boundaries. And so we'd rather have them engage in those conversations and relationships in advance, because we never know which school might have an emergent need that they're responding to. We want, particularly at the elementary, thinking about bicycle and pedestrian safety. We have Walk to School Week that occurs in September. At the secondary level, where they're more likely to confiscate some paraphernalia, to talk through those protocols. How does that work? We want them to identify traffic concerns, and we're going to start doing, on an annual basis, safety security audits. So the expectation is by the spring that they will have done that, and that process will be redone every year on an annual basis. That's not the right button. So what this looked like in terms of staffing is there will be one community resource officer for each kind of high school feeder pattern. Each of our middle schools and choice secondary schools has a school safety and prevention specialist. And then at the comprehensive high schools, we have two. Over the past couple of years, that group, we have Sheila Kemble has been providing them with annual, multiple times a year, with training opportunities. And those are school employees who are building relationships, they're walking the halls, they're kind of helping ensure that we have supervision. And they're also cross-trained such that if there are needs at other schools, that they're able to provide that type of support across the schools. Then I mentioned, we have an interest and an expectation that we're engaging with our community on an annual basis. And as we looked at that, one of the things that I asked the Risk and Safety Services Department was to be thinking about how do we design a process in such a way that's going to be able to engage meaningfully, particularly with students and with families that we may not catch from a more traditional model. And so some of you board members may remember Felice from the Puget Sound ESD. She's the director of equity for them. And so we actually partnered with her and her department and worked on building out a process designed to try to engage more people, particularly from communities that we wouldn't traditionally hear from. And one of the things, what they landed on was essentially a 3-tiered model that's self-selected. And so, the community connector model, so kind of the tier 1, the highest level, is not dissimilar to what we're doing within the equity department, where we have community liaisons. Where we essentially have people who say, I really want to be a part of this process, and I also can help be a conduit to my community and then bring back their voice to this conversation. Tier 2 is really more consultative. And we think about, you have something to say, you want your voice to be heard, but you may not have the time nor the interest necessarily kind of being part of an ongoing conversation. And so people will have the opportunity to identify and say, hey, this could be small focus groups, or I want to be, I want to hear for a survey, or I would like to sit down for an interview. And then tier 3 would just be, I just want to be in the loop of what's going on, and maybe I'll decide to engage in a different way, but I'm interested in this. That department has been, as people over the past year have been communicating with whether it oftentimes comes to the board, and then we pass down, they've been building a list of folks who have expressed interest, and so they've actually reached out to everybody kind of on their initial mailing list, asking if they would like to participate and at what level they'd like to participate. And then we also have launched a website with more information about this, and we'll be pushing out in district communication around this opportunity. And this will be an annual conversation because just as I talked about, that our layers evolve and the context evolves. And so the idea, instead of it being kind of the singular point in time where we're having a conversation around school safety, and then whatever we decide then is just that it's done, we've moved on, and then a few years later we come back to it. But the idea being is that this will be part of an annual way of which we do things. And so I imagine for this first year there'll be a lot of kind of information gathering, hearing stories, and that might lead to some action. It could also lead to areas where they say, let's go deeper in this area to focus the conversation for the subsequent year, for the future. Here's specifically the time frame. So invitations have gone out. Communications, we have some district newsletters scheduled, I believe, for the next week. And the website is actually live. I'll show you a screenshot of that. That Tier 1 first meeting occurs on October 18th, and we're bringing in an outside facilitator to help for that. One of the things that we want to also build our team's capacity to facilitate and engage with our community in some different ways, and that will be push us and challenge us, and so excited about that. They look to wrap up the annual cycle in April, but then we'll continue this on an annual basis. And here is so. The Community Resource Officer page is, if you go into programs, and it's on our webpage, programs and services under school safety. All right, thank you. And I guess anybody was writing down questions?
Director La Liberty.
I can't tell from the presentation, so I'll just ask the question. Are we entering into the same MOU with each jurisdiction with which we contract?
That's a really good question, and I did not answer that. So each of these MOUs, yes, are same in terms of kind of the principle, the expectations. So Kirkland has more officers because we have essentially 2 feeder patterns there. Kirkland's also unique in that they have had a proposition that so the community resource officer name actually came from conversations with Kirkland, and the other Redmond and Sammamish kind of like the sound of that, so we all agreed that was a good way, kind of the best name that captured the model. But yes, in terms of kind of the expectations, the MOUs are all the same.
Okay. Just a couple more. So I think you referenced as a policy connection at the beginning OE 10. I think a corollary to that is our equity policy, which has similar language. It's OE 14 around the student experience and a desire from the board that be equitable across the district. So I guess I'll now phrase it. I'll add a question at the end of that. Will the student experience be the same? Will the student experience be the same across the district, regardless of what jurisdiction or municipality that the school is cited? And if not, how will it be different?
Okay. Thank you for the second question. So it will not necessarily be different by design. So essentially, if we look at what are the things that we really want to make sure that we do well within that concept of that partnership, it's very, very similar, right? So threat assessments. One of the things I've asked the team is I want us to spend more time doing tabletop exercises with the resource officers, because while I believe that we generally do a pretty good job of responding when there's threats, there's always opportunities for continuous improvement, and those are tense moments. And so those are moments that I'd like to see us with our building administrators and our district leaders that engage in those moments, spend more time training and preparing, think about traffic. Those things should be consistent. When we talk about what that student experience is in terms of that interaction, that's more. I would say one of the things that we're asking for, and we talked with our police agencies and police chiefs, right? There's a keen interest in relationships. They often will talk about we want to develop good relationships with young people, and so we've talked about, and one of the ways in which that you build relationships is how you show up in those moments in which you need to interact with them, and so those will be conversations that we have. And so that it's not necessarily leading first and foremost with building relationships. It's when you're in those moments where you're interacting with students, or you're needing to interact with students, how do we show up and build and have good relationships there? And so, and I think we've also heard from some of our students who have also said, and if I don't need to interact with an officer, I don't necessarily want to interact with an officer. So we're kind of moving that shift to try to say, instead of that it's this broad kind of, you're everything to everybody, that it's like, what are the opportunities where we really need to engage well on? And when you're engaging with students, trying to ensure that those are as positive as possible. And now I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, so maybe if I've lost the plot, but
Can I ask it maybe a little differently? Because I appreciate that depending on the people that are in our buildings, there may be different experiences for students. But but in terms of the programmatic control that we have as a district and when the MOUs we enter into and how we implement those, is the expectation that programmatically there will be a consistent program across the district with these MOUs that we're entering into?
yes.
Okay.
And I'll say, and I think that this represents, on one hand, you could say this doesn't represent a significant change, right? We're actually not changing the number of officers that we're contracting with. On the other hand, you could say this does represent a significant change because what we're leading with is what are those things that where we're most likely to have either the most significant or frequent sorts of interactions, and let's focus on how are we training, preparing, and leveraging the expertise that those officers bring, such that they really do contribute to the broader layered safety and security. So it's kind of how we're leading with it instead of saying that because we've made an investment in a resource officer, great, that's it, that's a layer, and then let's go do these other things. Not saying it's like, no, there's actually a very unique value proposition that these officers bring in the context of everything else that we do. And so how do we leverage that in a way that that recognizes those things that only they are uniquely kind of able to do, and recognizes that when we're engaging with them, or with families engaging with them, or when students engaging with them, those are kind of often heightened sort of moments, and so that's why we want to ensure that those things that we're well prepared for.
Can I ask just one more on the same
Can I
line?
add
Dr.
to
Holman
it?
would like to respond.
So the purpose of having consistent MOUs across four agencies, is to work towards a consistent program implementation. How do you reach consistency? Day one isn't consistent. It's over time that you reach consistency. There's specific benchmarks and expectations. There's timelines associated with some of the actions. That's how you start to establish consistency, such as by September 30th, you'll check in with all schools and do X, Y, Z. By the time in spring, you will do a school walkthrough with all of your schools. So those, if you will, expectations, which are, these were mutually agreed to with our police agencies and our team, that allows us to actually have some tangible kind of checkpoints so that we can monitor consistency. As you said, there's going to be nuance depending on what's happening in any learning community, what's happening in any specific school, but some of the ways you reach consistency are by actually having agreed upon expectations so that you actually have something to benchmark against, as opposed to in the past, it really was kind of up for interpretation between the school resource officer and the building administrator, and that's where so much of the difference in the program model came.
Before you continue, I'd like to add a question that might clarify a little bit. So in the slide where you refer to the MOUs, it references a new standard operating procedure manual. I forget what slide number it was. So my question was in relation to that. The ownership of that manual, is that dictated or written by the school district, and then our local law enforcement is then agreeing to follow that standard operating procedure and then follow up? What happens when there's a disagreement about whether or not standard operating procedure was followed?
Okay. All right. So yes, the standard operating procedure is similar to the MOU, right? It's something that we jointly agree upon as what are those expectations and how certain practices are carried out. So when we have say, a disagreement where around, let's say, an officer engaged in practice we believe was outside of standard operating protocol. We've had a practice, and it's actually written into the MOUs, of how do we escalate those concerns with the agency that we're contracting with to address those concerns with the officer, and in some instances, and in replacing an officer if that's problematic, which has occurred in the past. I was part of a situation where that had happened, and we needed that to happen. And so we actually have that built into the MOU of how do we escalate those concerns. We also have, and are working in part of that is we're also working on refining how we're there's a public complaint protocol, and so how do we escalate when there's concerns from a community member about an engagement with an officer. And so we went through that protocol this year, and then learned some things through that process. And so we're working to revise that process.
Director Stewart?
You've mentioned Kirkland, you've mentioned Redmond, but I haven't heard the word Sammamish be mentioned. I've recently had calls from various council members saying, what are you doing with the resource officers? We have a contract with you. We expect to have resource officers. What is the discussion with Sammamish at this point?
Yeah, so Sammamish we are continuing to plan to contract with Sammamish. They have an MOU. They provided one officer this past year. So as far as we're concerned, that continues to be, can be the plan.
I assumed as much, but I wanted to ask to be sure.
Yeah.
Also, we have at least 3, if not 4 schools that I'm familiar with, and maybe more in the other areas, but they're unincorporated, which has been up to the Sheriff's Department. And I understand last year they cut back their commitment because they didn't have the staffing. Now, I could be wrong, so tell me if I am. But those areas such as Evergreen and Dickinson, STEM, and I'm blanking, I'm sorry, on the fourth one. Thank you. That they fall outside those areas, and they aren't as quick of a response area, if you will, because they're not as close together. How do we propose that we service them?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And we actually, King County has not provided us with a resource officer for several years. I'm going to look at Sheila,
okay.
if you remember how many years? Year and a half.
Okay, well.
So King County Sheriff's Office has not provided us with an officer for a year and a half. We have engaged Sammamish in conversations around being able to provide support to those areas because they are technically part of their King County Sheriffs. And those conversations are continuing. We have a keen interest in both ensuring that we have appropriate response to those schools, and when there is those need for those response, that again, kind of the relationship, the understanding that the responding officer also understands schools, understands students. So that's still in development. I'm not able to speak much more than that, but those are conversations that we've engaged with Sammamish to see if there's an interest in helping provide that support.
When we talk about the relationships between the community resource officer, or whatever we end up calling them, I'm sorry, I understand the name varies from communities, but are they the ones who are assigned to that duty? Are they then, I guess the word specially trained comes to mind, especially when it comes to interventions with non or low verbal students who are in our developmentally disabled area, or for that matter, our deaf students who don't communicate without sign language. Are those officers going to be able to be versed in how you work with nonverbal, especially a developmentally disabled child?
Yeah, and Director Stewart, I'm glad you asked that question. Thinking back, that I was part of the Kirkland Task Force when they looked at this, and that definitely came up. As to knowing that we have students who are nonverbal or may respond in a way that's unexpected, if you don't understand that student.
Yep.
And so, again, the resource officers receive, and we'll have to follow up with what that training program actually is. But it's an extensive training program, and that's one of the things too that by connecting, having the officer be more intentional around for each of our schools and connecting that relationship with the administrators, they can also identify, and think about kind of, are there any particular situations? We have some students who like to elope. In fact, a few years ago, was involved I just happened to be at Redmond High School, and we had a student elope who had special needs, and there were a lot of us out looking for this young man. And so kind of those would be situations where it's like, hey, we have, that would be a part of that kind of introductory conversation. May or may not necessitate an introduction, but at least for that officer to have an understanding of, hey, this is, we want to make sure we're responding appropriately to that child's needs. And again, that's part of that conversation if we have instances where that can occur.
Not only the ability to understand that there are students that are in that capacity, or lack capacity, if you will, but also perhaps familiarizing those students with Officer so-and-so or so-and-so in those check-ins, because they need to know this person is out there to help you. And this is a person that you can go to if you've eloped and you don't know what the hell you are. My son wasn't fast, but he was quick. He could disappear in a heartbeat. And that's why you need to put in the service dogs to track him, because the school couldn't. But my point is to make sure that if it's not just one or two, but there's a community of officers that understand those needs, because I could see that being a problem when all of a sudden Joe's sick and Mary doesn't know what the hell's going on in the school, or vice versa.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of things on that. So one, so I wouldn't necessarily want to speak for every student or every family on thinking about kind of that connection. Mm-hmm. And so that's where, having those kind of decisions made locally in terms of this might be really beneficial for a child to meet the officer, or maybe that's not something that is of interest or desired. One of the things that we've heard from the police chiefs is they see value in having their officers go through and be resource officers because of that higher level of training, that kind of they're building their capacity for working with youth, which are a big part of this community. And so even if they're no longer a resource officer, that they've essentially built up skills and have an appreciation. And they may also still be ones that are responding to schools. As
I recall, Redmond is now certified. Redmond Police Department has received a special certification in dealing with developmentally disabled and emotionally charged situations with a student or any members of the public. I don't know if Kirkland has gone through that certification yet or not. I know the Sammamish hadn't, but that puts us a leg up in Redmond.
Director Guthrie.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, with the name change, there's specific state laws around the SRO program, and this is just a name change, correct? It's not saying that it's no longer covered by those state laws?
Yeah, it's a great question, yes. So as far as we understand, all of the same state requirements apply regardless of the name change. So we're expecting to, our policy, have our policies and stay in compliance with all of those. And so, because they're still interacting and responding to schools, we're still engaging in a contract with them. So we are expecting to comply in the same way that we were under the previous model.
Okay. And also, we've talked about this as a budget issue on the district side, on the city side, to be able to staff. Is this fundamentally a budget issue, or if budget were no longer a problem tomorrow, would we want to stay in a similar model? Would we go back to, I think we had 8 SROs in Kirkland at one point?
Yeah. So I think where we're experiencing in all of our agencies, and because we actually, so all of our agencies are telling us that they're experiencing staffing challenges. They're experiencing to different degrees, and they have different different scale, right? Kirkland has our largest scale. And so we actually didn't do our budget reallocation until we essentially recognized that that was excess capacity, and we were just holding those funds, and that we had a keen interest in making sure that we were funding behavioral health. I'll say I think that we were also, those conversations then caused us to think about the model in the context of our other layers. And so, so I think when we think about what is the best use of kind of our resources and the model that we have, we believe that this model provides a lot of the same benefits, and also really focuses what the value that we believe that the officers bring, and hopefully also is responsive in thinking about what we've heard from our community thus far, around kind of wanting to focus and narrow kind of that scope with resource officers. That said, and going back kind of launching to the community, that's way out of here, but going to the community connectors, we're at this point with our model, and I think that we've kind of continued to evolve the model, and we believe that we're at a point where really engaging with the community intentionally around this, and hearing what should be the next evolution is the right step, and not necessarily just kind of either turning back to, if we had a magic wand, and like we'd be going immediately back to that. So.
Director Bleaser.
Hi. I just have a quick operational question. Mm-hmm. Knowing Redmond High School actually has feeder schools, both in unincorporated and incorporated, how is that going to work?
Yeah, so I think that's because those are King County. That's where we essentially, because that's in the King County, that King County Sheriff, it's their jurisdiction. And so that's where the conversation with Sammamish, we believe, provides us with an opportunity to provide coverage for those schools. So it wouldn't necessarily be a true feeder pattern, because Redmond is not providing service in unincorporated King County, and those are still conversations that we're working out.
So they'll be under the jurisdiction of King County, so
Yes.
it won't feed. Okay, so just curious on that. The other piece is I appreciate the way you've actually looked at the program in relation to the entire school safety piece, the addition of resources that you've shown being added, and therefore the reason is which to look at to why do we redo this and think about that. Again, that sort of aligns with what we were hearing from our community in many ways, and sort of fits. The addition of the community piece, I think, is important. I think Director Guthrie bringing up a good point in saying, well, if you had the money, would you have all those police officers back? My take after hearing this is I don't see that being the reality unless for some reason through that process of analysis that the model would shift back to that old way, that it would be beneficial from school safety and we've lost things. Is that a fair?
Yeah, I believe that would be a fair, because at this point there'd be an intentional resource allocation, and the board understands that we're at a point where we're needing to look at reducing our expenditures, and given that there's a variety of student needs, particularly post-pandemic, I think a lot of those things were present before. We were certainly working on student behavioral health needs and trying to respond to those as best as possible pre-pandemic, and that has been exacerbated afterwards. So there'd have to be a very intentional decision to kind of increase the investment, and also thinking about, and then with any of our things, what is it that how does this contribute, and how is this best fit together? So thinking about, it's the same conversation we think about with our school safety and prevention specialists. What are the things that they're uniquely able to do, being school staff, base staff, wandering the halls all day? There's things that they're able to do and provide support that fit in the context that a resource officer might not. And conversely, the resource officers provide very unique value to us that a safety and prevention specialist or a building administrator doesn't. So it's kind of, how does the whole team play its part, and how are we making sure we're investing in aligning those pieces such that our school communities can be as safe as possible?
So I will just say I do appreciate the way that that is laid out, the shifting of resources to mental health and being addressed some of the behavioral health issues with along that lines. I think there was a lot of good thought process in the addition of the community engagement piece as another overlay to this. I think that's a big strength of what you've done here in trying to establish this system. So thank you.
Dr. Holman?
Matt, do you mind going back to the layered safety and security slide? It's like the very beginning. I apologize. Yes, yes. I feel like we're going back in time. So I guess I think it's a good question. Would you go back to the model you had before? And I would say we've been talking about the best implementation of our school resource officer program since the day Matt started as director of student services, and it had nothing to do with any one individual officer. It's what is the best way to support the needs of our schools and our students. And kind of to Director Bleasner's point, all of these elements have led to what I believe is a more robust response to our students. And as we think about students considering self-harm, well, the best way to respond to that is through having a well-documented plan, having people in place who their skill set, their expertise, and their professional training is in supporting individuals that are considering self-harm. And so for me, the evolution and evaluation of programs, they happen for a number of reasons, and at times they happen because of resources. And so to me, this was the natural iteration of the evaluation of a program, and I think this is actually going to use our officers' skill sets better in alignment with their training and expertise, because they're going to be able to provide support to all of our schools as opposed to narrowly focused on one school. And so for me, I think this is aligning with our layered school safety much better as opposed to the prior model, which it was there because it had always been like that. And so for me, this is just the evolution of the program, and I agree that the Community Connectors program will help us refine.
So I'm going to take my turn real briefly here before we dive into the second round of questions. My question is around the Community Connectors engagement plan. I guess it's a little bit unclear to me what the goal or the intention around this engagement is. Usually when we talk about engaging with stakeholders, there is a problem that we are trying to change or solve or address. For example, school start times. We knew the parameters around it, we had a goal, and then it was how do we get there, and then empowering our community to help us find the best solution. In this case, it seems like we have our plan for our new CROs. We know that we've got some strong opinions around CROs in our schools. So I'm a little bit confused about what is the goal and the intent with our Community Connectors post plan, and then how do we utilize this? I mean, I think it's a great idea to engage, clearly, but I guess how do we then come out of this and not have it be an extractive process for the people that did engage? Because we already know that they're going to have potentially very different viewpoints.
So I really appreciate you asking that question. And to be honest, there's some things I don't know about where this is going. And that was because you mentioned some of the ways that we traditionally engage. And I pushed on the team. I said, if we engage in this process where there's a singular decision point, it will very much feel like either I was hurt, because we know that this is a subject matter which some people feel very strongly and very strongly on kind of polar ends of the spectrum, right? And so if we were to frame this to our community, yes, no, that's not going to necessarily resolve anything. In many ways, we would actually be left without really clear direction and how to move forward. We also know that, and we've heard from some of our community members who have, kind of have a perspective that is important to be shared and to be listened to, and is not necessarily about a yes or no, but it's about kind of like what's the impact, what are their concerns, what are their fears, right? Like they're sending their babies to us, and there's a concept called in loco parentis, right? Like take that very responsible, that's in lieu of the parents, right? Like we have this responsibility to return their children to them safely every day. And so that's one of the reasons why the team actually engaged with the equity department and worked with Feliz, rather than working with just kind of like, we could have just run a normal committee and say, we do this, check the box, we've got this. And really centering around more of that conversation of kind of what are the things that we should be attending? What are you care as a community about when you think about kind of your child going to a safe school? So what are the things we could attend to, which may have nothing to do with the resource officer? Or they could, right? And then also thinking about kind of in that, like, what are the things that we should prioritize in those relationships, in those moments? Because if we have no resource officer, we are still going to engage with the police, and we will engage with the police on a regular basis, right? There will be threats that are made. Somebody will post something on Instagram, and we'll be wondering, is this, like, real? Is it not real? And we're going to have to engage in that response. There will be things that impact our children outside of the school, right? We have children who are abused or neglected. And those all come in, and the school has an engagement with them. And so we think about kind of like, what is the nature of that relationship is a very different question than a yes or no. It's how do we try to ensure that we're working together to ensure the safety and welfare of children in our community. And so this model is a very different model because it's open-ended. We also have, and as Director Guthrie pointed out, we actually have some state requirements. And it doesn't say do this one time. It says engage every year on an annual basis. And so this may evolve. This may be, we may kind of get into it, and it may not provide us with the clear direction, but I think our interest was to try to engage with our community in a different way and to see if engaging in dialogue in a slightly different way also might lead us to hear or think about some things differently. And not just in the context of a resource officer model, which it's both a requirement and an important part, but also in the broader sense of safety. Because, we think about, what are kids experiencing? What are parents worrying about? This could be a forum that allows us to essentially elevate things that are of concerns. Because we go back to that layered safety and security. It might not be necessarily a resource officer engagement, but we might have to think about a different layer that we either don't have or maybe that we need to enhance that could address that. So in many ways, I don't have an answer for you. I'm kind of both nervous and excited for this, and we will learn things. But I also appreciate the team's kind of willingness to engage in this a little differently. And they've had to have some conversations because this is different for also for our police agencies. Right? We're asking them to kind of engage in, like, we're going to engage with our community and ask questions around safety and their experiences. And, are you ready to kind of go along for that ride with us? Because we don't really know what to expect. So I'm hopeful about this process, and I'm sure we'll learn things about, about it as we go through. So it's not traditional. I don't know. And part of that is also by design.
Thank you. So I would like to spend a maximum of 10 more minutes on this topic. So is there anybody else that has another comment? Director Stewart and then Director Guthrie to our students? Either of our students? You don't have to. I'm just asking. I just want to make sure I catch you. All right. Director Stewart.
John, you mentioned the evolution within the schools of the people being trained to recognize the need for self-help. I'm assuming that is part and parcel of the mental health first aid, however they phrase that, where there's students as well as administrators and teachers who have been through that class. Do we know how extensive that is throughout the school system? Do we have at least one or two staff members at each school that has been through that training and has experience in that training? And for that matter, especially in the high schools, how many students do we have? And then I have a second unrelated part.
I'll say this, I don't know school by school, but hundreds of staff have gone through that training.
Good.
So, but I don't know school by school exactly.
That helps. I mean, the point is that the less called upon for that issue by having someone in-house plays into the second issue, and the second issue is response time. Do we have any indication as to what the change in response time to reaction to a situation will be in the school district, not just the high schools, but also the other schools that will be feeding that feeder system, and for that matter, the schools in unincorporated King County that has no assistance? How will that be engaged if we don't have the relationship with the county sheriffs? Will the Redmond feed into it? How will that happen? Yeah. And I'm concerned about response time.
Yeah, so I don't have response time data for you right now. That's something we can seek to get. And our current status is that King County there's not a resource officer there. So when schools in unincorporated King County require emergency response, they're calling 911. And when we have schools that even when they're under the traditional model, when there was a resource officer assigned, they're still calling 911 for a response because the officer may or may not necessarily be on campus at that particular moment. Or some of our campuses are also large enough that actually getting a response from an outside officer could be faster. Or just when you're calling 911, you're doing multiple things at once, right? You're on the radio and you're calling 911. You're navigating that. So yes, we're certainly that certainly would be of an interest for us to in an emergency, having a tight response time, and that's something we also engage. We engage in other conversations with police agencies around training and preparation for larger responses in our school settings. We hope that it never comes to that, but they have an interest in preparing, and that's something that we partner and work with them. So that in the event of emergent response, that the first responders have an understanding how to navigate our schools.
Thank you.
Director Guthrie.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify too, because that we've talked about the officers being assigned sort of based on like one per comprehensive high school, but in addition to the unincorporated King County situation, we've got like Lake Washington Learning Community spans both Kirkland and Redmond. So am I right in thinking that the Redmond schools would be interacting with the Redmond SRO?
Yeah, so it's great because Rose Hill Middle School is in the Lake Washington feeder pattern, and that is Redmond. And so historically, they have had a resource officer assigned to Rose Hill Middle School. So yes, that would be a Redmond police officer. So it's basically, maybe it's more of akin to say that geographically, that's about the number of officers that we have, and then they're assigned schools, but they still have to respond within their, in terms of their assignment, within their the agency's area of responsibility.
Okay, thanks. And can you give me a sense of what an SRO's day looks like, and maybe like what might have looked like 10 years ago, and what it looks like today? Are they? I think I'm getting the sense that they used to be sort of camped out at Rose Hill Middle School, for example. Now that's not going to be the case. Are they also responding to calls, like other unrelated calls? Are they dedicated to the school district? Can you, what does that look like, and what could students expect to see?
Okay, great question. Thank you. So an SRO in that traditional model, right, where they're essentially assigned to one school, typically, the officer will be there before the start of school, often have a vehicle kind of visible and present. They may be out monitoring traffic. or greeting students wandering the halls. There's a lot of times kind of in the halls, kind of connecting with kids, kind of getting a sense of what's going on. If there's fights or some, something that is not supposed to be happening at school, they may respond to that. Another part of our context is we also, over the past decade, our discipline rate has really fallen, and particularly our schools are engaged in MTSS programs and thinking about how do we think proactively around teaching expectations for behavior, providing a lot of cueing and reteaching, how we're engaging and trying to kind of restore and kind of remediate the behavior. So we're moving away from this. 10 years ago, a kid would engage in something and be like, okay, so you did something bad and we suspended you. And so how we've interacted when students are engaging in behaviors that are not safe or conducive to the learning environment, but don't constitute crimes. They may be engaged in harm, but that's harm that our professional staff are able to help mitigate and try to resolve. And so, we've built, that's another part of the story, our layers, right, that we've built that up. And so, under this model, you wouldn't necessarily, at any given school, you may not necessarily see the resource officer on any particular given day. What we would expect is when they're at the school, though, they may be there conducting a walkthrough of the building, trying to check and look for, thinking like talk about doing and saying, where are particularly vulnerabilities, walking with a building administrator so they can think about how would you respond. They may be engaged when we're doing drills, and so they're helping assess and think about, like, hey, what's our part of this? We also have our administrators do tabletop exercises for emergency response. We'd want them to do emergency planning. The traffic, we want them doing traffic assessment. They may still be engaging with kids and having conversations in the context of their duties there. But we would expect that they're going to have less time kind of wandering around and kind of be more specifically focused on kind of specific deliverables or expectations that they're trying to ensure that each of our schools are meeting. Getting to know our counselors, because if they're part of this threat assessment team, kind of building those relationships. And so, for some of our kids have minimal interaction right now, and that may still be the same. And for our, a lot of our elementary schools, they're not having an officer, they're not used to having an officer. But the officers do respond. And when we look at, there's child welfare calls, there's things that are happening that they may need to respond to that elementary school. And we also sometimes have adults that don't necessarily behave well at our schools, and so they're responding to that. So, again, it's one of those things, I think, like I told was saying earlier, is like, in some ways it's not changing a lot, in other ways it's in other ways it's it's changing and evolving. And so, so we expect that they'll be providing service to all of our schools. And so, but, we can also I would expect that they'll still be at our high schools probably more than our other schools. We think about, substance use and things like that. That tends to, occur more at the upper grades. And so there's probably more need for them to respond at those and engage at those levels. But not necessarily being at that school all the time, every day. So.
Matt, I was told I have 1 minute. And so my question is similar to Director Guthrie's. And I think I've asked you this before as well. In the vein of, old habits, it's easy to fall back into the old pattern of behavior, and it's what many of our officers know, and it's to go to that same school where they probably know and understand the context. And so I don't mean accountability from getting people in trouble, but how, as a district, and either on our own or in partnership with our agencies, going to monitor accountability for this new model. And I think I just went over a minute.
All right, so on this slide, so some of the things we're going to be looking at essentially is are some of these things that we're asking, we're saying this is what we want to prioritize, that partnership, are they occurring? So the Risk and Safety Services Department will be monitoring those. We'll also be collecting monthly reports around kind of what sort of activities are they engaged in each of their schools. So that'll be a level of kind of monitoring and engagement that we have not done before, because we haven't been as specific around what is it that we really want the program to do. And again, I think Dr. Holman, you talked about that this this does represent a shift, and again, and it's not. I would say I think what we have an interest in is that we have officers who have chosen to do this, and said that they want to work in schools. This is how they want to serve their communities. They've gone through additional training, and so we want to ensure that and they're highly trained. We want to ensure that our schools, as many of our students, benefit from that in a way that makes them safer. And and then we've identified some very specific kind of things where we think that this is where we want to focus that relationship, because these are the things that come up frequently, particularly where we think about kind of those emergent threats that can happen, and in those moments, and so we want to make sure we're prepared to respond as best as possible.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
So if anybody has any further questions, you can provide it in a written email to Dr. Holman. We are going to move on to the next item of our agenda this evening. It is an update on the Sustainability Policy Board Committee. Director LaLiberty, will you provide an update on the committee's first meeting and next steps going forward?
Do we, Dr. Holman, do we have some slides that we can, I have them on my screen, but I don't think I have the ability to share. Excellent. I'll start talking while we do that. How about that? Oh, there we are. Great. Okay, we had our kickoff meeting for the Sustainability Policy Committee on the 16th. On the screen, you can see the members, in addition to myself and President Choi and Dr. Holman and Deputy Superintendent Gillingham. We also have on the committee Shivani Sama, who is one of our student representatives, our returning student representative for this year, and Nirali Saha and Jamie Jonas, two parents with a lot of subject matter expertise and work in the district on sustainability efforts already. So they are light years ahead of me in terms of their thoughtfulness and engagement on these issues. So I really appreciate having them on it. Our first meeting was focused on level setting, talking about what board policy is, how we've developed policies before. We talked about some successes and some challenges in prior policy development, just so the whole group was familiar with prior processes and the thinking. We engaged in stakeholder mapping, identifying stakeholder groups that we would like to interact with as part of this policy development, and sort of had a very brief discussion of what some of that engagement could look like. I think we have one more slide. Is that right? Excellent. Great. So here is a rough timeline of the process. So we are just beginning. We're at bullet or dot number 1. Stakeholder engagement and linkages. We are going to have our first linkage, which Shivani is helping to facilitate with students around sustainability, to sort of talk about their values, their interests, what they would like to see in a policy. And just a reminder for the board, those are opportunities for us to listen and take in information. And so Shivani, and we'll be helping her put that together. We're going to be putting that together in September. The idea is to have a committee draft policy in October, November, and then additional stakeholder engagement once we have some policy language for people to say, no, not this, how about this, to happen in November, December, with the goal of having board action in January. The hope being around that, I'm getting there, the hope being that this will provide us the ability to monitor it in the September or November 2024 monitoring cycle. So that we're not on a, sometimes when we develop new policies, it takes us over a year to monitor it for the first time, and the goal is to avoid that. So it's a accelerated timeline. I think that we've already done a lot of work, the board has, in terms of learning and identifying values. And I think we're a lot further along on this as a board than we were with some of our prior policy efforts. So hopefully we can make this happen. How'd I do?
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Dr. Holman, did you have something you wanted to add? No? Okay. The next item on our agenda is the superintendent report. Dr. Holman?
Okay, so a few things I want to share with the board this evening. One, I want to recognize staff that have been engaging throughout the summer with a variety of different events. You may recognize some of these events. Rigapalooza in Sammamish, Derby Days in Redmond, and then this last Friday we had Big Truck Day at Farrell McWhirter Park. And we go to support those efforts, but we also go with staff. You can see up in the left-hand corner we have two of our human resources staff members, both Zakia and Michael, and then in the middle is Ava from our communications department. We go to these events to support our community, but also to say we're hiring, we're a great employer, we'd love for you to come and consider working in our school district. And on the bottom left, that was Big Truck Day, and kids got to roam around the bus. The bus driver figured out how to disable the horn, which I thought was a very, very wise decision. But Big Truck Day is super cool. I think they said there's over 300 preschool families, and so you can imagine what a great introduction to Lake Washington School District it is to climb on a bus and talk to our great folks. So just really appreciate, you can see on the bottom there, communications, human resources, transportation, our Links Lunch Buddy program, knowing that we always need additional partners for our Lunch Buddy program as we have students that as folks go through that process that we can match them up with. And so really appreciate our teams doing that in the summer months, and I know they actually have a lot of fun doing that as well. I don't remember if I recognized at our last board meeting, but I just want to make sure I recognize that we had, I believe it was 16 students spent time this summer to make sure they had the needed credits to graduate. And as the board knows, we host a graduation ceremony here for any student that graduates during the summer. And these 5 young men chose to participate in our summer graduation. And as Director Stewart knows, they each had a very unique story and a reason why they were needing to graduate in the summer. But the grit and determination to actually not finish at the end of your senior year and to come right back to school to finish it up, it is worth celebrating with them. And so I can tell you the families really appreciate us hosting a graduation ceremony. And our rule is if there's one student that wants to walk at graduation, we're going to hold the ceremony because it's that important to us. So kudos to these young men and the 16 individuals that completed this summer. Here is a picture of our district leadership team. These are all district administrators, our principals, assistant principals, our central leadership, directors, associate superintendents, deputy superintendents, our department managers. We spent a week at Redmond High School, Monday through Friday, a couple weeks ago, engaged in learning. The consistent thread or theme I heard from folks is they could see the through line of our strategic work through everything we were doing as you think about multi-tiered systems of support, inclusive educational practices, and equity. And so this was the Friday of our DLT week, and we just asked everybody to join us for a picture, and then they ran off for their weekend. And so kudos to each of them as they're now preparing for what comes next. And wanted to share with you a few calendar pieces. August 28th through September 1 is when all of our certificated staff return for their classroom setup, their professional development, their training, their collaboration, like everything to get ready for students to come back. So Leap Week is really about certificated staff, but I can tell you, if you drive past our schools right now, the parking lots are starting to fill up because our teachers are already back setting classrooms up. They're already talking with one another and planning, even though Leap Week hasn't commenced. We have a number of our certificated staff, counselors, special education staff. I know I'm missing others that contractually they're actually required to come in before Leap Week, and so those staff are starting to return as we think about making sure master schedules are finished for our secondary schools, planning and preparation for IEP dissemination, and then our classified staff. Each contract is a little bit different. Some of our staff are there all year, custodians, like they're showing up every day. But like our IAs, our paraeducators, they each come back at a different point in time. And so really between now and the start of school really is that ramp up to when staff start returning. And then the first day of school for grades 1 through 12 is September 5th. And the board is used to our kindergarten family connections meetings. Well, we agreed with LWA for this year, but also in the contract for following years. We're actually starting the year for grades 1 through 5 with conferences / connection meetings with our families. During COVID, our elementary schools did that with all of their families, and our teachers told us that was highly beneficial to have a positive interaction with families to start the year off, to get key information about, the students, communication with families, like all of those pieces, building relationship with their families, as opposed to, for some, really waiting for 6 weeks before you really have a conversation with a family. And so we're excited about being able to have our elementary teachers really engage with their families at the beginning of the year, which means for 1st through 5th grade, they'll have half days to start the school year, where our kindergartners, they actually don't start school until September 8th. First day of preschool is September 12th, and then the first day of SNAPS, which is our additional supports for our students with autism diagnosis, starts on September 15th. And so lots of work leads up to welcoming all of our students back to their classrooms for learning. And so that's my superintendent's report for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Holman. The next item on the agenda this evening is Public and Community Affairs. Director Stewart, do you have anything to report?
Just a few items to put on everybody's radar, and it's more a function of scheduling to be aware of. The NSBA's Day on the Hill and WASD's Day on the Hill have intersected on the same day. So the idea of having people in either DC and or Olympia at the same time is going to be problematic. And it also may answer the question of the expense of going to DC. I don't know. But it's something we need to be aware of. And in the coming weeks, WASD will have its conference on policy and General Assembly. And I'll be attending remote, and we'll see. Leah has expressed interest in perhaps actually going to Spokane in the middle of the summer, or the end of the summer. But that said, that's primarily been it. There's been a lot of activity in the federal area, but it's been a lot of commotion, but not a lot of accomplishment because of the situation in the House.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything they would like to add? Director Bleasner.
I'd just like to build on that. WASDA has put out the proposal handbook, so there is access to that to give you an idea as to what all that voting is. That will be at the Delegate Assembly, so that just got published.
Yes, Director Stewart.
Thank you. Thank you for the reminder. Not only the delegate handbook is out, but also thank you to Caitlin, who from our legislative liaison office. She is putting together the survey of for all the board members. I'm taking a look at it. It's fun. It's engaging. You won't fall asleep after the third page, fourth maybe. No, seriously, it's something we really need to, because we need to have y'all's input as to what direction you want to see us vote at General Assembly, so we're not just representing our own opinion. So be aware of that. It should be going out later this week, midweek perhaps, and please get it filled out ASAP.
We'll have that out to the rest of the board this week.
I was just going to say, as we did our post-session wrap-up meetings, there were a few requests for meetings, and so I know we're following up with a couple of our folks on that. I believe it was Representative Sen, if I'm remembering correctly, asked for, or maybe it was Representative Tai, actually asked for a consortium of school districts to get together to talk about electric school buses. And so I'm in the process of reaching out to my colleagues to see who would be interested in participating in that. Caitlin's reaching out to both, I think it was Representative Tai and Sen, because they both had that interest to figure out scheduling of that. When we get that started, then we'll want to also invite a couple of board members to participate in that as well. But kind of an exciting conversation to continue that, elevating some of our ideas in that regard as well.
Thank you, Dr. Holman. The next item on the agenda is board comments. Does any board member have any comments, or student representative? Director Stewart.
Just two, and they're unrelated. I'd be interested in hearing from teachers, IAs, paras, both in the Gen Ed and the SPED area, of how they feel the training has led so far, and how they feel they're ready for this school year in the inclusion settings. Because we've heard from the administration, but I'd really love to hear the boots on the ground and say, you know, this has been really great. This is going to help us a lot. We really could use X, Y, or Z. And I think it would be great for the board to hear. And two,
Well, before you go to two, I was just going to say we have scheduled inclusion updates for this year. So
right,
we
but
should
I'd
be
like to have
hearing.
it from the teachers and staff.
Just wanted to let you know it's coming.
Yeah. And also, I'd like to hear any future about plans we may have for putting security cameras on our school buses, because I understand that that's a concern for a lot of folks. And I think would perhaps be a step in the right direction, especially now that we're branching out with our CSROs or whatever they're going to be titled.
Director Liliberty. Okay. Director Guthrie.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for the family connection meetings. I know that my daughter's elementary school had chosen to do that. Like, we did it during COVID, but the teachers got so much value out of it that they chose to do it last year. And I'm really excited that they're not going to be like cramming it into Leap Week with everything else that they've got going on. So that's a really great step in the right direction. I would love to see, I've heard from parents that they're like, oh, we don't know what to do with this. Like, you know, what are we going to talk about? You know, it's the first week of school. Like, there's nothing to talk about. So that might be a piece to think about too. Really positive step in the right direction for teachers, but understanding for families, like what is the intention? What do they, you know, what should they be using this for?
Okay. The board plans to meet for our next board meeting on September 11th. Study session will be at 5 p.m. with the board meeting following at 7. I will now entertain a motion to adjourn the August 21st, 2023 board meeting.
So moved.
Seconded.
It has been moved by Director LaLiberty and seconded by Director Guthrie that we adjourn. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 All those opposed, hearing none, motion carries. The meeting is adjourned at 9:19 p.m. Thank you.